Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's Senza Fili Sparring Partners webinar on CBRS, 5G, Terragraph, and Wi-Fi. What's best in the Fixed Wireless Access Toolkit? Our speakers today are Monica Paolini, Principal at Senza Fili, and Gino Villarini, Founder and President of AeroNet. I'm Kendra Chamberlain, and I will be moderating our webinar today. In Sparring Partners webinars, we watch our debaters discuss a topic live on video without slides. We would like to encourage our audience to participate in the conversation. Please share your comments and questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. All comments are visible to all participants, so please keep the conversation polite and respectful. Our speakers will do their best to address questions as they go along and as they become relevant to what's being discussed. So please do not hold your questions until the end. Finally, we will be live tweeting the webinar today. You can follow along or participate in the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag Sparring Partners. And with that, I'll hand it over to Monica.
Kendra, thanks so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. And to have Gina, who's a return guest. I think it was pretty much about a year ago that we did the Sparring Partners on Terragraph. So at that time, we just focused on one technology. But the reason why I'm very happy to have Gino today is because he is in Puerto Rico. He is at AeroNet. He's just using all the technologies, I think, that I can think of. So that's really a good case to see how do you pick. In most cases, when you offer fixed wireless access and related services, it's very difficult for a service provider. Well, it's very rare that a service provider only uses one technology, but Gino uses them all. So it's really great to see. It's a great opportunity for all you guys in the audience to ask questions. When should we do this? When should we do that? Because I think it's a really crucial question. There are many technologies out there, and they all have their role. It's like friends. You have multiple friends because a friend is good for one thing, it's good for the other. So it's not like you choose one friend and you're done with. So I think it's going to be really interesting to talk. So, but before we go on to this, I just wanted to so from my end, sort of the background, I just finished a report on Terragraph. I'm going to send you the link in a second. I'm working right now on E-band, and I've been doing a lot of work on Wi-Fi, CBRS. So I'll be looking at all these technologies, and of course 5G. And so it's interesting to see how they sort of come together in the AeroNet network. But I'm going to let Gino tell us a little bit about what is that they're doing, and then we can go on. And as usual, make sure you ask your questions as we go along. Feel free to also comment among yourselves, and we'll pick the questions as we go along. So Gino, thanks for being our guest, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Monica. I'm very honored to be here once again. Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to basically share our experience with all the distinguished visitors and guests that we have on the podcast or vlog. AeroNet, actually, we're celebrating our 20th year now. We were founded in 2001, so it's 20 years now that we've been dealing with wireless technology. And the reason that AeroNet started was a particular need that I had to bring broadband to my home. And 20 years ago, broadband was merely 256K. So a lot had changed since then. But it's been a great experience, and seeing the industry grow as a whole. I remember 20 years ago, we most of the startups had to make their own equipment based on loosened card and not hack firmware, but modified firmware. You have to put together the antennas, and I've seen the industry grow each step of the way to what it is now. That even the big mobile operators are joining the fixed wireless party. So that's very interesting to see. as of today, and taking up from the point that you started with, we are dealing with a lot of technologies. We are seeing what tools are best for use case and their customer needs, but it's always focused on what the market is asking for today, and what trying to define what the market will ask or require in the future. So, we need to, even though the industry moves pretty fast, we need to be strategic about the decisions we make, and try to foresee down the road, in at least 2 3 years, what services and speeds the end users will be requesting. So it becomes very a very uh, uh, the scientific slash not so scientific uh, try method of trying to guess the future. And and that involves a lot of research, try testing of equipment. We are, since our beginning 20 years ago, we were very I would say adventurous in trying out new technologies. Every time a new vendor came out with a different technology, new technology, we tried it out. We bought the equipment and tried it to see if it really helped our company move forward, and provide faster services. Because at the end of the day, the industry, the way it's marketed, and has been marketed for the last 20 years, is based on speed. So, we started offering 250K, then move up to 1 megabit, and nowadays, the the trophy, or the golden uh, rule is to provide 1 gigabit. And we're hearing about new technologies that are able to achieve that in a fixed wireless environment. That's what we're excited about today.
So, can you just give us a quick description of what about Puerto Rico? What is special about there? Because there are a few things that are quite unique.
Yeah, there are a lot of
Weather
special
being
things.
one of them.
Not going into the climate, the weather, or the beaches, especially on the industry. I think we're very competitive environment. Puerto Rico is not that big. We have about 3.5 million people living in the island, but we have, last time I counted, we have over maybe 50 operators operating in the island, and that goes from the big companies, the mobile operators that we have currently. We have three, possibly four when Dish joins the market. Um, your traditional cable company, your traditional ILEC, several CLECs, and then a whole bunch of WISP. So that says that the local environment is very entrepreneurial and competitive. We do have a lot of customers that traditionally have looked to alternate technologies to be able to connect to the internet, because even though we're a small island, we have a lot of rural areas that traditionally have not been served well by the local big companies or incumbents, or suffer from the, let's say, the growing pains of those companies and poor service. And fixed wireless has been a major tool in the last 20 years, and then that was compounded actually 4 years ago when we got hit by the Hurricane Maria. All major telecommunication infrastructure was basically shut down, and rebuilding fiber infrastructure is pretty hard. It took a while to rebuild copper and coaxial and fiber infrastructure. So fixed wireless and microwave and wireless as a whole became the go-to tool to be able to communicate in the island for, I would say, 1 2 years after the hurricane. And then when the fiber networks were finally finished, then the market started to obviously gravitate towards fiber solutions. But still, a lot of companies, we serve a lot of enterprise businesses, and they became aware of, even though they had two fiber providers and they thought they had redundancy, those two fibers were right in the same poles. So when the hurricane came in, all those poles came down, and the redundancy was zero. So they truly appreciated a fixed wireless connection back then, and are still now using it today because they know they need true redundancy on their networks.
Yeah, and I guess you raise an important issue that redundancy is not just the service provider; is where the physical connection comes in.
Hmm.
And so,
Exactly.
really, wireless is different from fiber in that respect because it's a completely different infrastructure. So it provides a true redundancy, and in a place where weather is much more of an issue,
Exactly.
clearly that it's much more valuable. So I guess that's another aspect of wireless connectivity. So even if you have fiber, you want, and in fact, you can provide both fiber and wireless on your network, and you can provide redundancy within your network as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. We have our main network is based on fixed wireless infrastructure and microwave backbone, but we also have fiber within our assets. So the San Juan metro area, we have fiber connectivity by on our network, and also out of that area, we have partners, third-party partners that allow us to connect to their infrastructure. So we nowadays we call ourselves a hybrid provider, where we have fiber and wireless infrastructure. But even at that point, we do realize the value of both technologies, and able to, let's say, maximize the benefits of both on our network.
Yeah, sometimes I guess especially like a few years ago, it would be like the wireless ISPs are like no fiber, and so
Mm,
it'd be like one or the other, but you really need to put them together. Now, since we did the Sparring Partners last year, you got a CBRS license. So
right.
can you tell us something about how do you see CBRS in the context of your wireless and wireline services?
Yes, for us, CBRS is a new tool in our toolbox. We invested heavily on acquiring power licenses on the last auction, and our intent is to basically create another layer of fixed wireless services on top of the current one that we have. We currently have a major network here in Puerto Rico, based of over 200 plus tower sites, that's currently providing services to most of the island. I would say over 85% of the island is covered with our service, um, based on licensed 5 gigahertz equipment. But now with CBRS, we have a more powerful tool in order to reach all of our customers, or most of the island, because there are several issues with line of sight. We got a lot of trees here, so there's some line of sight issues, and CBRS will become, let's say, our major tool to be able to reach those customers. And since we are in a license band, obviously provide a more reliable service that we've been providing today.
If you did not get a license, a PAL license, a PAL for CBRS, would you still deploy it, or you would just say, well, let's just hold on to that?
That's a great question, because the kind of investment that you have to make to build out a CBRS network makes the equation difficult to maintain if you do not secure the channels. So, you know, I think that will be a very good analysis for us. From the start, from the get go, we knew that we had to invest in CBRS, and specifically because C-band is not available in Puerto Rico, so it becomes even more valuable to us and to the market. So, without having any other mid-band spectrum, we currently own some portion of 2.5 gigahertz now with CBRS. So, having two powerful mid-band bands on our spectrum portfolio was the right tool to have on our portfolio, on our toolbox. And without having C-band, then what other mid bands will be available there were none others. So for us, was very important to invest in CRS. And I will say that if we didn't get a license, maybe we would deploy in areas where we didn't have a lot of competition for airtime. Other operators deploying CBRS, so we could maximize our investment in the infrastructure.
Now, on the other hand, if CBRS is good, you have a license, it's reliable, that's excellent. On the other hand, if you want to have the gigabit connectivity, you have limitations in terms of bandwidth, which I
Right.
guess is kind of like it's a trade off. You cannot have everything, and nothing is perfect. There's no technology that does it
No,
all. So you are more limited in the terms of bandwidth.
that's correct.
How do you balance that out?
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to do a call out to all the manufacturers that we need a system with CBRS and 5 gigahertz with carrier aggregation between both bands, so we can achieve 1 gigabit, throughputs. So if any vendors are listening, please.
That actually seems like a very good idea. You need to
Yeah,
have.
the technology is there. You have LAA, you have multi-band carrier aggregation on LTE and 5G systems.
Right.
We just need the base stations to be able to support it and the CPEs. So I'm throwing that just out there. So maybe someone will bring it out soon. But
Or even with 5G, right? You can have NRU. So
yeah, exactly.
they're
So
all
it's
good.
let's build it. But going back to your question, what we're looking for or actually envisioning with being able to provide gigabit service is right now the tool available to us will be 60 gigahertz with developments with Terragraph technology. Obviously, that's has its limitations in how much coverage you can achieve with that technology, but we're using it, and that's the go-to tool now to be able to achieve 1 gigabit on a fixed wireless platform. But we're hoping that obviously when 6 gigahertz becomes open, possibly next year, we're seeing already some early roadmaps with some equipment that will be able to achieve 1 gigabit per second to the end user. So we're pretty excited about that. We're hearing a lot of interesting information from technology from Tirana Wireless. Uh, they have been in stealth mode for God knows how many years, but now is some information is coming out of some beta testing that looks pretty interesting. So we're pretty excited about all these new tools that are going to be available for us and be able to reach end users with, let's say, fiber like a gigabit speeds without making a huge investment in fiber.
Absolutely. So you can combine the unlicensed and licensed together, which I guess
Right.
that's really the sort of holy grail, because
Exactly.
unless you have a lot of spectrum, but you cannot reliably use it, but you still have, with CBRS, you have a good combination, and a good combination of reach as well. We got some questions about the cost, but before we got into the cost, the TCO aspects of it, uh, I wanted to see whether you can give us a little bit of an update. So, we have CBRS, 5 gigahertz now, 6 gigahertz is also coming. Although,
Hmm.
is 6 gigahertz for outdoors? I mean, it's not finalized yet. And you're going to have enough, are the power limitations going to be much of an issue?
Yeah, I think the latest NPRM from the FCC has the upper band available for outdoor with some spectrum. I'm sorry, some transmitter power similar to unlicensed outdoor use. So we'll be pretty close to what we're seeing with traditional 5 gigahertz unlicensed. Obviously, the equipment has to be certified and registered with what they call the AFC. So they're going to have a system similar to a SAS, not as stringent as a SAS, but it will be kind of a centralized controller directing how what channels can you use on your base stations.
Yeah, my understanding is that they haven't really figured out the details yet. It's just,
Right,
we know it's coming, but it's not. I guess with the SAS 2, it took some time to figure it out, but it should be much easier because all the equipment is fixed.
right.
So it's if you either have a link or you don't. It's not like comes up. It's not like a ship that comes to shore and it starts transmitting.
Exactly. They already know
Yeah,
where
CBRS.
the 6 gigahertz links are. They will know where the possible transmitter using unlicensed the band unlicensed will be. So it will be fairly easier to coordinate.
And also, if it's a point-to-point link, it's easier to go around. I mean, it's much more
Exactly.
limited in scope. So
Exactly.
I think that's, and it's a huge amount of spectrum.
It
So
is. It is for outdoor use. I think it's over 500 megahertz. So, and manufacturers are already saying that you should be able to use 160 megahertz channels. That's very optimistic. I'll be happy with 80 megahertz. So
no, okay. Now, last time we talked, it was about Terragraph. Any updates there? Because
yeah,
they
we
do have gigabit per
yeah,
second connectivity, right?
exactly. We with Terragraph, we have been, last time we spoke, we were basically trialing a Facebook quit by base trial in Old San Juan, which is the historic city in the capital. And now we are migrating to commercial equipment. We are trialing several vendors. We are mostly focused using CN from Cambium Networks, which we have found is it's a great tool. It's a great unit. But we also, testing other vendors. Um, but we have deployed commercially on a limited basis. We are currently migrating the Facebook network to CN Wave, and then deploying on other markets. But the tool, it's for really dense areas to be deployed. But we're very excited about it because it's another tool that will allow us to compete with the fiber providers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the kind of thing, Terragraph, I initially thought it was just more for rural areas, but it's the other way around. Usually,
No,
I
no,
use it in, but at the same time, there is a lot of activity now also going on into using 60 gigahertz in more rural or less dense areas. If you use a point-to-point type of link,
right.
are you using that as well, or is
We
that?
we use it, but we're still maintaining very short ranges because here in Puerto Rico, the range zone is at the categorized as range zone N, so that's pretty high on the range fade table.
Mhm.
So the amount that we can stretch those links in 6 gigahertz is pretty limited. So we're really focused on very dense areas.
Yeah. What about E-band? Is that something?
Yeah, even we use it a lot for backhaul. We have a lot of backhaul, especially we know it's 10 gigabit radios that are really cost effective. The price have really come down in the last couple of years. So we are basically putting them next, right and left on the whole network. Sometimes when the links exceed certain distance, we use another band and have a multi-band backhaul that will fail over to the other band. But there have been proven our network basically to be a really good workhorse and a great tool to have.
Do you think that as E-band becomes more sort of widely available, is going to be becoming more of an option, not just for backhaul, but also for to connect, you know, smaller businesses or even homes?
Yeah, well, nowadays we use it as point to point to high capacity clients. We have several clients doing 1 gig, 5 gig, 10 gigs on E-band. Uh, but I'm not sure if it's gonna be a solution for a home. I'm not really sure if it's allowed to be used in a multiple environment. And for having a good uh, scale and volume on your infrastructure, you have to use a multi-point system. If you try to connect multiple homes with a point-to-point system, it becomes pretty costly in terms of the hardware and the operational cost of your network.
Yeah, so it's basically either um, backhaul or
Oh, high capacity, yeah,
high capacity. So where you really need to have a point-to-point link, and at that
right.
point,
Yeah.
yeah,
If the FCC changes the rules and allows multi-point, I think that will be pretty exciting too. Because the ring fade on E-band is less than in V-band, which is 60 gigahertz.
exactly. But on
Right.
the other hand, I mean, do you think that that's going to happen? Because I haven't heard that the move to have E-band of from point to multi-point. Because then, if you have that, then you might create more of an issue. There might be more of an issue with
Yeah,
interference.
I
So,
haven't heard much on it. There's a new band that uh it's allowed for multi-point on the millimeter wave spectrum. I think it's around 38 gigahertz or 39, which was kind of on the reshuffling of all the channels, but it's still pending final rules on it. Maybe we'll see something there on the multi-point environment based on on 5G equipment and on license use. And there, and after that, everything else is licensed.
yeah. Since we're on talking about backhaul, I see a question from Shiv. Hi, Shiv. And talked to you for a while. And it's about the backhaul options for different fixed wireless technologies. And he asked if a Terragraph can ask as a backhaul option. Now, Terragraph is, well, it's a transport technology, so you'd use
Right.
it for backhaul. But I would like to add one thing here. So some people are using it, and you guys, I think, are using
Mhm.
it too. You can use it for to backhaul Wi-Fi hotspots or small
Yeah.
cells. Clearly not macro, but you know.
Right.
On the other hand, we think of it as a a transport technology, but when you connect single home in the residences, it becomes the difference is breaking down between access and transport. Sometimes for smart city applications, you can have Terragraph connecting to a camera or to a bunch of IoT devices.
Mhm.
So the difference between transport and access seems like it's kind of breaking down.
Yeah, it's kind of gray area.
So if you can comment on that, but also but to Shiv's question, what are the backhaul options for fixed wireless access that you are using? Or
Well, we use our Oro backbone is based on MPLS technology. That's layer 2.5 in terms of what kind of fabric we use to interconnect all the nodes. But on the layer 2, layer 1, we use fiber and microwave. That's everything we use. And based on each case, then we use different sub technologies or sub equipment from each technology. So for example, we might use on our fiber backhaul, we have 100 gig connections, 10 gigs. We might use even keep on our backbone, depending on use case. We have XGX-PON, which allows you up to 10 gigabits per second on a multi-point deployment. And then on the microwave, we mostly use 11 gig microwave. We have some 6, we have some 18. Obviously, a lot of E-band, and whatever is the most right, or whatever is the right tool for the deployment. And in terms of when we shoot services to a high capacity client, we have to do some engineering work to define how much capacity the customer has requested and what kind of technology is the one that is most cost effective to be able to support it.
yeah, so there is a question that came through the chat, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. So for you guys in the audience, please ask questions in the Q&A, and if you cannot in the chat. But the question is how easy or quicker it is to deploy Terragraph nodes. And maybe you can sort of expand it a bit and compare how different technologies, how fast or slow are they to deploy. Clearly, fiber takes more time, but
Yeah.
what about Terragraph versus CBRS versus
Yeah.
Tirana?
I think most of the fixed wireless technologies are very similar in terms of time to deploy. It's basically you install a equipment on an asset of a tower or a rooftop. You run some power and data cables, and then you just add it to your backbone. So there's not much difference, I would say, between any of them. Just the particular case that Terragraph allows for a mesh deployment. So you might have your main node shooting to the end user, and then you can use customers as relay points because they will allow to mesh. So that's the only difference that I see in terms of different types of fixed wireless technology and the deployment time. That with Terragraph, you will have your main node, and then end user might be able to be used as a part of the mesh, and then you just install the end user and have expanded your coverage fairly quickly.
Now, it used to be a few years ago, always the talk about is it self-install or not? And I think that now the issue has kind of dropped down because everybody realizes there is no self-install. But maybe you can tell me otherwise.
Well, with CBRS and using technologies like LTE and 5G, you could do some sort of self-install network. The big question there is what you want, because if you use a self-installed network, that means that you will have to send the end user a self-installable unit that will be either be indoors or outdoors, but it will not be uh, let's say maximized in terms of performance. You will be dealing with lower modulations and higher retransmissions, and that will bring your whole network performance down a couple of notches, maybe a 50% down. So if you want to maintain a really high performance network, be able to provide the higher speed possible on your network, the golden rule is just go with the fixed outdoor unit. So having self-install would be ideal. Yeah, if the customer could, but have it commit. You have to make your own decision based on that. That's on mid-band. When you go higher in 5 gig, 6 gig, that's, let's say, fairly impossible to achieve because of the non-line side limitations of the bands. And we've seen it with what companies like Verizon have tried to do with millimeter wave, and they're not be able to scale as they thought.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also, I guess if you have a CPE installed not correctly, not only this your customer is getting bad service, but it uses more of the network resources.
Right. Yeah.
It's actually it's bad for other people as well, for the
Exactly.
neighboring customers. So
Yeah.
it's really not a good way to go. Um, Now, can we talk a little bit about cost? So in terms of deployment, pretty much anything you have to do it. You have to go and send somebody to install it, so it's not all that different. Wireless, if you know where you're going, you just put up the equipment and you're done quick. What about cost? Is there a difference in cost?
There is.
And
And
how do you go about that? The sort of what are the trade-offs between cost and performance?
exactly. Well, and if we are just talking about fixed wireless platforms, there are several options currently on the market with several vendors. Can go from the low end equipment, not low end on technical capacity, but low end on price, which are most of the time are equipment based on Wi-Fi chipsets. They are able to leverage the high volume of production of Wi-Fi, and they have modified code, so they can run in a fixed wireless scenario, and they use very common features like GPS sync in order to sync your network, your channels and stuff like that. So they have grown a lot, those platforms, and they're pretty cost effective. Then you go to the next step will be like custom fixed wireless equipment, like from vendors like Cambium and people like Radwin and Tirana, which they use their own chipsets. So those are more costly, but they're equipment that is basically has been produced to be able to do fixed wireless correctly. And then the next is LTE or 5G technology. So that's kind of the three tiers that you can see or you can uh, use on a fixed wireless network. And to be frank, a single cell site, for example, with 360 coverage for with either 3 to 4 sectors, you can spend from $5,000 up to $100,000, depending on the technology you choose. So it goes and varies a lot depending on your hardware selection. Uh, and also, depending on how you deploy your network, if you're going to a rural area where you don't need a lot of density and you can have cells that will cover 5 to 10 miles, or you go to a urban environment when you have to do small cells or short range cells where you will cover 1 to 2 miles. So your cost of network varies heavily depending on what you're trying to achieve, what speeds you're trying to achieve. For us here in the island, we see first what kind of speeds we want to provide to end users, seeing what the market is currently currently offering, and then we design around that and what we want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years down the road. Because from the 20 years experience we have gone through maybe 5 network upgrades or change outs, let's say. So the technology changes, and what we're seeing is that it lasts about 4 to 5 years, and every 4 to 5 years we have to swap out and do, let's say, a migration of equipment. So that's what we're seeing. Um, so uh, you know for us, going back to the cost question, our CPE cost for an end user also depends a bit on the equipment that you choose. So, but the average that we're seeing in terms of cost for us, using the equipment, putting together the cabling, the installer, the labor, this miscellaneous materials, the average is about $250 average cost per customer installed, versus technologies like fiber that cost goes to above $1 to $3,000 depending on how the network is deployed. So it becomes a really cost effective solution to the operators to use a fixed wireless technology. And now that we're seeing gigabit speeds, that then the question becomes, do we really need to deploy fiber to the home? Do we really need to go through that cost of deploying fiber to maybe rural places where it doesn't make financial sense? So that's the big question that we'll maybe need a couple of more years to be able to define.
Now, if you go, if you compare fiber to wireless, the sort of the cost structure is completely different because, and I'd like to get back to that, but if you compare different wireless solutions, let's say that you go from the sort of, as you said, the sort of low end Wi-Fi type of equipment to the sort of high end, Tarana Cambium. If you look at the per bit cost rather than are they high price? Because when you look at it, it's like, okay, the equipment might cost, say, I'm making this up, twice as much, but you
Right.
get twice as much capacity, so it's
Right.
actually not more expensive.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, that's a great question to run those numbers, cost per bit. We have done it in the past, and the high end equipment comes out winning. So
yeah,
even though you have to make a bigger investment in your infrastructure, as you say, the cost per bit is lower. So you're paying less for the bits to be delivered to your end user.
yeah. I guess if you are in a very rural location where you only have a handful of customers, you don't need that kind of
Right.
extra capacity. But then again, you don't want to have a mix and match of too many vendors. So it's good to have a system where you have multiple vendors, but you don't want to go crazy and have every single vendor on the planet.
No, you don't. That becomes a operational nightmare.
Yeah. Actually, let me ask you this: sort of in general, how many vendors? I mean, how do you go about? How many vendors is too many, and how few is too few? I mean, and I obviously you
Yeah.
don't have to give me a number, 5 or 7 or whatever the number is, but at which point is it worth to get a new vendor in your network?
Well, we have probably, like, I would say 8 major vendors right now. But for example, let me give you a really simple example. Um, on our whole customer base, we have provided for the last 5 years some Wi-Fi solutions tied to the connection that the customer buys. So we were using I'm gonna use a true example. Most of our fixed wireless infrastructure is based on Cambium networks, and we were using Cambium networks routers and gateways to provide being able to provide services to the end users for Wi-Fi connectivity. But we found that even though the equipment was good and the integration with the centralized controller, so we can have a visibility of all the network and all the parts of the connection of the customer, uh, we found that there were some things missing, and we were having a lot of issues with customers experiencing Wi-Fi problems, and that translates into calling the service provider and asking to open tickets and stuff like that. So we were dealing with a lot of issues related to Wi-Fi. So we went out to market and started to research other solutions that were, uh, let's say, more powerful in terms of Wi-Fi. And when we decided to start using Plume Network Solutions, which is a mesh system. And the benefit of Plume is not the mesh part; it's the cloud control they have. They have, I will say, the most advanced control tool that I have seen in order to troubleshoot and actually automate a lot of processes. So our calls regarding Wi-Fi has really come down because we chose to migrate to another tool, even though we were coming out and integrate a new vendor, a new tool, a new management tool. The advantage for us was so much that we decided to do so.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you another question. And we had a question earlier from the audience about. I did a model in CBRS, fixed CBRS, and Michael was asking, if there is an updated data. And usually, clearly you want to have updated data, but there's some basic facts that it doesn't matter how you update it, that sort of stay there, at a constant. And one thing, whenever I do a fixed or mobile model, the cost of the equipment is something like in the region of 20%, because then you have all the installation, you need to get So there is, and maybe that number is somewhat different for you, but clearly the equipment cost is only part of the equation. And it seems like oftentimes when you think about the cost, you compare the cost, it's the cost of the equipment that comes first. But because of all the other costs are just so high, again, it just seems like to save a few bucks on the equipment when the biggest cost is installation, and that's independent of of the product you're choosing. It just seems like we when we look at the TCO, we seem to put too much give too much weight to the equipment cost. Do you agree to that, or?
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
mean,
think
that
so.
is important. Well, I guess it's an important factor because you can control it more than you can control the installation costs.
Right. Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it matters, but not it's not really crucial.
Yeah. An installation crew that will climb a tower, install equipment. They don't care if it's gonna be low end equipment, mid or high end equipment. It's gonna basically cost the same if the same hardware. It's just 3 or 4 sectors, couple of power cables, couple of fibers, and some equipment on the base. So it's kind of similar. So yeah, you're correct. We focus too much on the cost of equipment, but that's the one variable that we can control, and especially on the CPE side, because maybe you would deploy 10 towers, 50 towers, or 100 towers, and your cost is kind of fixed. But when you deploy 1,000, 2,000, 5 or 10,000 CPEs, then those costs start to creep up.
Yeah. Now, the people in the audience are kind of quiet today, so feel free to ask us questions because there's going to be no Q&A at the end. The Q&A it's ongoing, but we do have a question, and this is from Anna, and she asks, "Have you faced the migration from customized solutions such as Cambium to standardized ones like LTE, and what are the triggers at that moment?" Now, I think that in some cases there is a you know, if you want to go to LTE, you need to have spectrum. Although I guess you can do
Right.
FWA, but I think that there's also here a sort of a more general question: how important it is for you to have a solution that is standard based versus a proprietary one. Because proprietary, you have obviously you can optimize it more,
Mm.
but standard based is standard based, so you can have more choices.
Yes, and that's a great question. And right now, we kind of in the middle of a decision. For the most time, we have been using Cambium Networks, which is a proprietary solution, and now with CBRS, we are able to choose between either pursuing or continuing that route with Cambium equipment, or going LTE or going 5G, which are open standards. And what we're seeing is that with LTE and 5G, those are technologies that were previously developed for mobile environment, and they're kind of being tweaked or adjusted fixed wireless. Whereas when you go to, for example, Cambium or other technology from a proprietary vendor, they have developed that tool specifically for fixed wireless. So they have more, let's say, knobs to tune in the solution. So even though we're seeing the huge value on an open ecosystem like LTE or 5G, we're still debating internally which way to go. So we have not. I don't have the answer right now because we're still asking that same question internally. Well, I will keep you updated.
Okay, yeah, we'll have another one next year and
Yeah.
see how you decided because standard based and sort of like if you have a your typical Wi-Fi network, not for fixed wireless
Right.
access, for access. Um, Clearly, there is an advantage, but if you have a fixed wireless access network, you control both ends. So you don't really want it to be a multi-vendor network. I mean, I don't see any much of it. Like in a Terragraph network, you're not going to have the distribution point and the CPE to be from different vendors. I don't see
Right.
anybody being interested in that.
Exactly. Even though they should be compatible,
But why do you want to do that?
why you want to do that? Yeah. Just
It seems like you're asking for trouble.
right. That there's gonna be some vendor features that you're gonna miss because obviously the vendors will put in some special sauce in their solution just to be able to maximize the solution.
Yeah.
So one example that we're currently debating on our let's say a proprietary versus LTE discussion is that on our network, we serve different markets, and one of those is the wholesale market, where we provide last mile services to other companies here in the island, and for that we utilize a lot of layer two technology, and that is something that is missing from LTE. LTE is pure layer three, so if we choose to go to a LTE 5G solutions, then we have to design and maintain a layer two overlay on that network in order to be able to provide those services to our wholesale base.
Yeah. Now, before we get to Shiv's question, what about 4G versus 5G? Now, you're like, okay, I guess you started deploying CBRS on 4G, but you can use 5G as well. Do you see moving to 5G at some point, or what's the
Well,
what's is
my
it worth
my
it?
I think yes. I think yes because even though LTE equipment is more widely available, is more cost effective from the vendors. Why invest in something that is being phased out? That's the way I see it. You're investing on your future. If you invest in 4G, maybe you can spend a couple of years of value in life on that network. If you go to 5G, LTE has been here for what, 12 years now? So, you're looking into having a longer roadmap, more revisions, more software upgrades, more efficiencies coming down the pipe. If you ask me the question, I will go directly to 5G.
Absolutely. Now, so the question from Shiv is whether you can talk about your customer mix, residential versus enterprise, and for residential, how much is single home versus MD multi dwelling unit MDUs.
MDUs. Yeah.
Now, let me expand it a little bit more because you also, as you mentioned, you're also doing wholesale backhaul. So, what is the mix? And I think it's quite interesting because when you have a network for fixed FWA, you can use the same network to provide other services on
Right.
top. So it seems like it's a very good from business model point of view. It's much more cost effective because you use the same infrastructure for multiple
Exactly.
services.
Yeah.
Because instead of having somebody else doing a separate network. So
Exactly.
can you talk a little bit about the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
areas?
I can share. Our current base is about 60% business enterprise, about 22% residential, about 18% wholesale. So, and then inside that's residential segment, that 22%, about 12% is on MDUs. So we traditionally had not focused on the residential market because it's pretty competitive. I'll say it's a cutthroat market. But for the last 20 years, we have done small, medium, and enterprise services. But we realized that a lot of our end users were requesting our small business services to be installed on their home because they were having issues with their provider. So we decided to, expand a little bit on that. So we started to offer a residential services about 5 years ago. We're not the cheapest. We're not competing on price on that segment. We're competing on value and service. So our customer base realizes it, and still we sign up a lot of residential customers, and in the last couple of years has been the highest growth on the company in terms of customer acquisitions. And then on the MDU is very interesting because we decided to target the MDUs about 4 years ago with a different product, and we decided to go, let's say, the Google Fiber way on that one. So we went and started to provide 1 gig services for $70 using a wireless network, and we were going to the MDUs with microwave, and then inside the buildings we were distributing using fiber or copper or Ethernet. So kind of what Webpass was doing before they got bought by Google Fiber. So similar deployment scenario, and that came out to be really exciting and very successful. We currently have over 120 buildings signed up on that network, with a lot of customers that are very happy with their gigabit service being provided by a hybrid network, which is fiber and microwave.
Yeah. So what about other services? So for instance, you can have IoT services, private networks. Again, you have the network, so it's easy for you to just go and just go like sort of like a step further in that
Right.
direction.
Yeah, we're looking at, we provide several other services to end users. In the small and medium businesses, we provide managed routers, managed firewalls, managed Wi-Fi, some, that kind of solutions that go along with connectivity, voice over IP. On the residential end, we are just providing the managed Wi-Fi and the voice over IP. Uh, and we're looking really hard on IoT and other type of services to see what we can achieve with that. It's something that takes a lot of work to be able to integrate IoT solutions into a customer operation. So we're looking into ways to maximize our network and integrate IoT. Private networks is something that we're still but looking from far away. I don't think that uh, it's going to be a huge uh, market for us here in the island. A lot of you know we, that kind of private networks I'll see on big campuses and areas that lack other service providers. And to be frank here, those scenarios do not replicate well. They're people are better served by them deploying Wi-Fi and those more cost-effective solutions. So we're still looking, but seeing what opportunities like is there.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you another question. Yesterday, there was the announcement from TIP about open Wi-Fi, which
Right.
is, when I heard the first time, it's like, well, why do we need to open Wi-Fi? It's interoperable. Everybody can use it. So what's the big deal? But it turns out that, for access, there's full interoperability. So you can show up with your phone and you connect to any network. But on the management side, it's actually quite complicated because if you have a different vendors in your
Hmm.
system, in your network, it's very difficult to manage them in a unified basis. So I wanted to see, what is sort of like your first reaction to that. And one thing that we sort of briefly talked about earlier is before the Sparring Partners is how about having something like this for fixed wireless access where you have so many frequencies, so many networks, and clearly they're going to be from different vendors because the different bands. Is there an advantage because it has to be really complicated to manage the whole thing? So maybe you can tell us a little bit what are the challenges there, and is there some way in which you can have something like open Wi-Fi or open RAN, something that tries to reduce the complexity of that?
Yeah, I think the open Wi-Fi idea, and now that it's being presented to the industry, is a great idea. We have struggled with that same situation by using different Wi-Fi vendors through all those years. So right now, we have not migrated all of our customers to the same solution. So we're now dealing with that same situation where we're managing and troubleshooting Wi-Fi customers from different platforms. It will be ideal if we could do that just on a single point of contact. So kudos to the TIP team. I think they're doing a great job with that, and yeah, I will push to have something similar on fixed wireless because it's really needed. And I think the vendors might not be very keen to do it. They will have their competitive you know reasons, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with the same. When you're dealing with a wireless network, you're dealing with signal, with all that data that comes out of that, the performance that you need to measure, the same KPIs. It's just the same. It's just only presented in a different way. There might be a little differences here and there specific to certain equipment, but you're dealing with radio waves, and it's physics. It's just the same. So, you know, uh, I will call out also the vendors just to have this make it work as soon as possible because it will bring more value to the fixed wireless industry than they think.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, let's say that there is a new area that you don't have any network. It's a completely brand new area, and you need to decide, okay, here I have CBRS spectrum, 5 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, 60, whatever.
Hmm.
You have a sense of what your customers are going to be clearly, what the environment is, the distances, and all that. But at that point, I mean, how do you decide? I mean, basically, you need to do some sort of RF planning, or do you just go there and say, okay, I know here is Terragraph, here is CBRS, or here is a combination. I mean, how do you even, you know, what do? You just do RF planning, some basic RF planning for all of them? How do you go and pick one?
It's a what happens is that when you're already say really invested in a platform, you need to just expand on that one because you're already your whole operation goes around and is attuned to that solution. So for us it might be X vendor, for another operator it might be Y vendor. But when you're already on your operation is really tuned out for that solution, it becomes just how to use that solution on that environment, how to maximize it there.
Yeah. We have another question from the audience, from Anna again, about the CP in 5G CPs, the cost of them. Any comments on that? I guess you don't have a 5G network.
Well,
You're not
we,
shop. Yeah.
since we are in CBRS, we have been looking to 5G solutions in CBRS and the CPE costs. And what I can say is I hope they come down soon on price. They're currently on the higher end. What we're seeing is between $300 and $500 for 5G CPEs, and even though they provide a higher feature set, more throughput. We are hoping that obviously after the chip shortages become a thing of the past, that the manufacturers will pick up and manufacture these in volumes and price will come down. That's always that happened as 4G now becomes 5G.
So sometimes you just need to wait a little bit.
Yeah. Volume.
Yeah. No, we talked about everything, but we have not mentioned satellite yet. And when you think about redundancy, well, satellite is perfect because it's a
Yeah.
completely redundant solution. No matter how bad the weather is, no matter what happens, the
Right.
satellite is still up, or should be still up.
It should be exactly.
Or if it's not, there is a different cost, so it's probably unrelated.
Yeah.
So is there a role for satellite that you see now or coming up?
Yeah, and now especially with the Leo solutions that are coming out, then with Leo you take out the latency issue out of the way, so it now becomes a service that's basically the same as your fixed or terrestrial broadband solution. So now with Leo satellites you can become more creative in terms of, at least from my point of view, in where to quickly deploy in certain areas. You have a special event that you need to offer high speeds on film locations, for example, or concerts, or that kind of situation where you have just temporary usage. And also new markets you need to deploy on a new area, and the fiber or microwave backbone will take a while to come in, because sometimes fiber takes really long times. With microwave, sometimes you have to engineer and design a couple of hops. Maybe it will take you 3 weeks, 4 weeks to do that, and you can start offering service tomorrow just by putting a satellite on a tower and a couple of access points. So it's a great tool to when you have the need to be quick to market. Rural areas where in the past you had to construct a lot of backbone to be able to reach them down, you can just quickly deploy something. I was the other day actually discussing with some friends I have in Facebook connectivity about designing some sort of quick deploy solution where you can ship like a box, and the box will just open four doors, and the tower will pop up with a satellite, and you can have a cell site in the box, and be able to just deploy it in a couple of hours. So that becomes a real that's become real with Leo satellite.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also you can provide redundancy. So if the
Right.
network
Yeah.
goes down, you have a completely separate.
Yeah. I just went it up through another tangent there, but yeah, traditionally satellite it's redundancy, and now with Leo also, but now it's even more more interesting because now you don't have the latency issue. So I foresee that Leo we'll see a lot of Leo usage in redundancy cases.
Now we have 1 minute left, so let me ask you the
Okay.
final question, or your final perspective. What is new? Where do you see the biggest opportunity? What over the next couple years, 5 years, what's going to change in fixed wireless?
I think that the fixed wireless as a whole, as the industry, is carving the niche, and it's that niche is becoming bigger, and a lot of industry, let's say, think heads and the industry as a whole, we see fixed wireless as the right tool to deploy in many cases. For the last years, it's been fiber, and I don't have anything about fiber. Fiber is great, but the cost of deploying fiber is still high, and there's no way to bring it down to the levels that you see on fixed wireless. And nowadays, everybody is accustomed to using this, which is wireless, and there's no need for you to have a corded phone all over your place. People are used to wireless technology. It's been proven that it works, and I'm just pretty excited about new bands coming on, more spectrum, and the future of wireless as a whole.
If there is one band and one technology that you think that has the greatest potential for you, which one would that be?
Midband, I love midband. I think it's a great mix between coverage and capacity.
Mhm.
I have a lot of obviously investments because we have midband spectrum, but no, I see it as a great tool. I see the future is midband, and on the technology still not decide. I'll keep that uh,
Just for
close.
the next year, for the refresh next.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
5G is there, but there's some interesting stuff coming down the pipe from other technology vendors that I want to still, sign off on 5G.
I'm glad you didn't mention 6G, but that's again.
That's a year, what, maybe 10 years. So
No, absolutely. Well, so thank you so much
no,
for
thank you, Monica.
participating and sharing your thoughts with us. And with that, we'll hand it back to Kendra.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much to our speakers today for that great conversation, and thanks to the audience for participating. This will conclude our webinar for today. There will be a recorded version as well as a podcast version available on the Senza Fili website in the coming days. And we have an upcoming Sparring Partners on Wi-Fi 6 and other Wi-Fis. That's going to be May 27th at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, and that will be with Martha Suarez of Dynamic Spectrum Alliance. Registration for that will be available at sensafili.com in the coming days. Thanks again to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.